Hello interwebs and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I just want to quick discuss something that I kind of touched upon and talked a little bit about in my review of Star Trek Picard episode 8, Broken Pieces, but I kind of wanted to reiterate it a little bit in case people didn't get all the way through my video because it was a fairly long review, and that's this idea of, is Star Trek Picard and Star Trek in general becoming a lot like Mass Effect and kind of stealing and aping from the Mass Effect idea? And, you know, spoilers for Mass Effect going forward in this video if you haven't played those games, and spoilers for Star Trek Picard if you are not all the way caught up on Star Trek Picard. So for those of you who have not played the Mass Effect games out there, which, by the way, if you haven't played the Mass Effect games, what are you doing? Go play them now. They're some of the best video games ever made and easily some of the best space opera stories ever written. And I'm someone who likes the ending of Mass Effect 3. I know a lot of people have problems with Mass Effect 3's ending, but I personally like them. But go play them. Totally worth it. Absolutely fantastic. To refresh you, or if you haven't played them, in Mass Effect, those games basically revolve around the plot that there is a synthetic race called the Reapers that I forget the amount of time, but every few million years, they come into our galaxy and wipe out all organic life and then recede and wait for the cycle to begin again over and over and over again. This cycle comes at around the same time when synthetic life starts to evolve within our universe. So in the universe of Mass Effect, there's a species called the Geth, which were a synthetic life form that were created by the oh gosh, I'm blanking on the people, but Tally's people. There's a race of aliens. I forget their name off the top of my head. But they created the Geth, and basically the Geth kicked them off their home world, and now they live on a fleet. And the Geth basically are an alien synthetic species that are at war with pretty much everybody, but specifically their creators. And we eventually start to, over the course of the series, gain some sympathy for the Geth and learn a little bit more about the origins and how they've been vilified and that they are actually people. But generally, as a whole, they're still kind of seen as villains by the end of the series and kind of aiding the Reapers, the people who come in and kill organic life at the end there. But again, you can find some sympathy for them through the character of Legion in that series. And Star Trek Picard is kind of going down a similar route, as we learned in the latest episode, Star Trek Picard Broken Pieces, that there is a species that learned that once we hit a certain threshold, basically once synthetic life evolves to a certain point, there will be another species or alien race or something that will come and potentially kill everybody. We don't necessarily know just yet with what's going on in Picard, but it seems like it's pretty bad. Like once we hit this threshold, an alien species is going to come in and kill everybody. And it seems like they kind of exist. They've existed for a very long time, like for millennia, well before the Federation or anything existed. So there's definitely some strong parallels to Mass Effect in that regard. And actually another series that this ties into that I didn't put in the headline was Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica also kind of featured a similar theme of humanity versus synthetics, that humanity builds synthetic life forms, the synthetic life forms rebel against humanity and basically kills them, and then it just sort of repeats this cycle. Then synthetics, build humanity. It's basically a repeated thing throughout history we learn, and eventually gets, again, spoilers for the end of Battlestar Galactica if you haven't seen it, which you should, because again, it's also one of the best space opera shows out there, and actually weirdly evolved out of Star Trek Voyager of all shows. Ron Moore was frustrated at Star Trek Voyager, so he went over and made Battlestar Galactica. That basically, at the end of that show, is they find Earth and manage to humans and synthetic life forms, the Cylons, basically merge and create one species, and hopefully that will sort of end this cycle of repeating synthetic life forms. But obviously, today we still may have problems with synthetic life forms, and then we may hit the singularity. So it's sort of hinted at that maybe the cycle will continue at the end of that show. So yeah, so it's sort of like this ultimately pessimistic look at synthetic life in both Mass Effect and in Battlestar Galactica, but still somewhat hopeful. I mean, Mass Effect also ends, again, spoilers for that, where you have the choice to, destroy all synthetic life, control all synthetic life, or merge with all synthetic life. And the series kind of pushes you towards the merging of the two being the best option, being like the good option, or killing them all, which I kind of saw as the darker option, but you could argue that killing all the synthetic life forms was the best and only option. That's a whole deep dive into Mass Effect philosophy here. But ultimately, it's kind of muddled in both cases. There's always this ultimate underlying anxiety against synthetic life in both Mass Effect and Battlestar Galactica. While ultimately both shows have hope for both of them, there is an uneasy tension between the two, and always a push and pull. And I think that that is something that Star Trek Picard has the opportunity, though I don't know if it'll take it, the opportunity to really rectify and really fix. Because one thing that always frustrates me with those narratives is I ultimately, personally, in my belief, think that synthetic life is a beautiful thing. Even today, even in the real world, outside of societal norms, when we create synthetic life, in a way, it's creating our children. If we really see, creating robots or biological beings or something that comes after us that is just as intelligent or more intelligent as us, we tend to think of like the Terminator scenario. They kill us all and wipe out all of humanity. But in a way, aren't they our children? Aren't they something that we want to pass on the best parts of ourselves to? I mean, when we think about kids, when we have kids, we ultimately know that we want our kids to be better than us. But we know we're going to pass on some of our prejudices and traumas and biases to our children, but ultimately we want to try and push our kids to do better than we did. We want them to move beyond us. And I think that same happens with AI and synthetic life forms. Ultimately, we'll die. If we do create synthetic life forms that are better than us, maybe we'll find a peace with them. Maybe we'll just die out. And synthetic life will go forward, but ultimately they'll be our children, and I'm sure we'll pass on our biases to them. I mean, we see that with like AI today. When we teach AI certain things, we pass on some systemic racism issues based on the data that we feed into AI. So AI is not going to be like this perfect, like we see everything and totally are moved beyond human biases idea. I think that, there will be flaws in synthetic life, but ultimately we want to hope that they can be better than us. And like I said, hopefully it doesn't mean humanity dying out, but even if it does mean that, I don't necessarily think it means like the Terminator scenario. Maybe we just naturally, get lesser as a species because synthetic life just, extrapolates beyond us. I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, but I do think that it's less doom and gloom as we think, but ultimately can be seen in a sort of beautiful light, that by creating synthetic life, it is like our children. And that is something that Star Trek showed us with Data in The Next Generation with Soon. He always treated Data as a child, as this beautiful thing, learning to be more human and to be more like us and can honestly move beyond us in a lot of different ways. And I was ultimately disappointed with Star Trek Discovery. While I love Star Trek Discovery, I don't hate that show by any means. I absolutely love it. One thing I was disappointed was the fact in season 2 it kind of created this villain, Control, and Control was just so vilified. There was no redeeming factor. It was just an evil AI, which I thought was a bit of a missed opportunity for Star Trek to discuss AI and synthetic life forms, and Star Trek Picard is kind of picking that up. And ultimately, I think Star Trek Picard is going to be a show about loving and appreciating synthetic life through Data, through the characters of Soji. I mean, we see it through Picard, him pushing back against this fear of synthetic life. And obviously, within the show, there's still that tension, that fear of synthetic life is going to kill us all. And so I really hope, ultimately, and this, I have no, knowledge of what's going to happen, but I really hope that the whatever this threshold is that causes some other alien species to come in and maybe wipe out all synthetic life or kill us all, that ultimately it's not something that the synths themselves do, that synths are not evil, that synthetic life is not the bad guy in this show, but ultimately synthetic life is just seen as another form of life. That's something that I really, really, really hope that Star Trek Picard kind of ends on or discusses, that synthetic life is not evil, that it is not something to be feared, but ultimately the thing to really fear is our own fear of synthetic life. That the thing that is really scary is not synthetic life, but our fear of synthetic life, that we need to move beyond our prejudice. That's the message that I want Star Trek to show, and I think Star Trek Picard has the ultimate chance to say that. And I think it's something that, as much as I love Mass Effect and Battlestar Galactica, they ultimately kind of failed to a degree in that regard, because they still ultimately showed that the ability to balance synthetic and human life always comes with a tension. That always comes with synthetic life may kill us all one day. That's always kind of the fear. I mean, Mass Effect had that with the Reapers, and the Cylons did that to humanity. And it's ultimately about finding a middle ground between the two. But I really think that Star Trek has the opportunity to thematically move beyond that and say, no, synthetic life is not our enemy at all, at no point. Synthetic life is ultimately something beautiful, and our fear is the only thing that we have to worry about. Our fear of accepting them, our prejudice against synthetic life. I think that tension should be something that Star Trek explores, but ultimately rejects. And I think that it would be something that would push it beyond Battlestar Galactica and Mass Effect in terms of being something truly uniquely Star Trek, and not just aping and copying off of those, but really evolving those themes of those two franchises. But what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you think synthetic life is something that should be seen as beautiful, or should we be worried about it? Should we be kind of cautious about it? I'd love to hear all your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more discussions on philosophy and Star Trek or different geek topics, consider giving my channel a subscribe. And if you want to help make these videos even better, consider giving to my Patreon page. It ultimately helps me pay my medical bills and also helps me maybe do this full time one day. So it would truly mean the world to me if you could help me out there. But regardless of if you subscribe or give to my Patreon, I'm just glad that you stopped by and enjoyed this discussion, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons: Eli Berg-Moss, Stephen Schuthart, Boyd and Marybeth Earl, Michael McGee, Lal Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Inar Sigurdsson, Marika Kwiechin, Munir Amlani, Mari Nekar, and Polly Mina.